Okay, hello guys. A lot to say in this video today, so I'm gonna get into it just right away. So we start on a man that we never see the face of through the entire 2 minutes that he's there. But this is the man that was mentioned by Felicia in episode 3, I believe episode 3, when she said that O&D used to do exports, or used to bring stuff to the exports hall, but now they send a guy to do it instead of them. So that's this man now. And he takes medical tools. I mean, obviously you have to wonder what he's using that on. Maybe something with Miss Casey or other people like her. I think it's worth noting here that he uses a black key card as well, which means it's like the higher level tier key cards that can get you into more places. But he goes in this exports hall with the key card and goes down. But sorry, I just sneezed. But the writers are not nice, and they don't show us where he's going or anything. Then we go to Audi Mark, who's taking pills. They show the pills for a little bit. There's some blue and black ones on the right that are just all blue and black. Then there's ones that are like combined blue and black. Not sure what this is. Maybe it has to do with Rogabi like prescribing them for reintegration. But after this, he talks about the fact that his innie fell off a rope and he got wet. That's what Lumen told him, that his innie fell off a rope and got wet. And you have to wonder why. I don't know what we were talking about. Is it because he got wet like when Helly was like laying on him, but other than that he didn't really get wet. Maybe the snow and all that. He probably got wet from being outside, I guess. But I mean, why is your excuse he fell off a rope? Might be something I'm missing there. Y'all can let me know. But then he takes this liquid or slosh or whatever out of the fridge. I talked about this in season 2 episode 2, I think it was, when the new intro appeared, because there's a scene in the intro that's weird where he's kind of like laying on a desk with some of these weird capsules next to him, and that's what this is. Maybe something else prescribed by Rogabi for the reintegration. But Rogabi just walks in. She must have a key to the house, I guess. She wants the dryer fixed. And Mark, asks like, when can I go through the next treatment or whatever? When can we keep going? And Rogabi says, depends on how dumb you've played it. So my first thought is like, has he been pretending that he's an innie when he is an outie like Helena? Or I don't know what she's talking about here. But then he says he hasn't seen anything different with his reintegration, but she says maybe your innie has. And we did see last episode that his innie saw a flash of Gemma last episode. Then Helena meets with Natalie and Mr. Drummond. Helena says that father should hear what happened from me. And Mr. Drummond says, we decided to spare knowledge from contretemps. Yeah, I like how he says it better. But then he says your tempers will rebalance quickly, which is, again, Kier with the tempers. But then Natalie says, should we arrange an obligement session? Helena denies. And they talk about the fact that Mark's at 81% to Cold Harbor. And again, the same question pops up. Why Mark? Why does it have to be Mark? Maybe it has to do with his connection to his wife. Y'all can let me know any theories below. But they decide to send her back in as her innie, not her outie, as Helly. And Helena's like, no, I can't go back in there. They're animals. Then Mr. Drummond says, Milchick's many errors have forced my hand. And guys, it's not Milchick's fault, okay? He tried. But the way she says father, like she keeps saying father, and then Mr. Drummond says father as well. Father encouraged it. And it's almost like weirdly like they're talking about like their same father, like, oh yes, father. Maybe he just thinks of James Egan as father. I don't know. I'll play the clip, but y'all can let me know.
Father encouraged it.
And then he says the work is mysterious and important. And that's obviously a famous quote that Mark said in season 1, which is either just like, oh, hey, he said the same thing, coincidence, or more proof that they're listening in. Then Helly goes up the elevator as Helly. Miss Huang is waiting. She guides her to an area where Dylan and Mark are. And Milchick says, hey guys, everyone's freaking out. I know that. But basically, we had a thing called the Glasgow block installed that allows an outie to, and then he gets cut off while he's talking. But I think it's pretty straightforward what he was going to say. Like, blocks, lets the outie be the innie, basically. Yeah, but everyone's yelling at Milchick and not respecting him at all. He's he ain't getting respected. Makes sense. But Helly, in the same moment, is learning that her outie was there as her, and that everyone now knows she was an Egan on the outside. And Milchick says that Irving is on a cruise voyage, which we'll see later in the episode, which is just not true. And then talks about the story of the Grapschuppen.
Have you ever heard the story of the Grapschuppen?
Love the way that he says it. But the Swedish king who went incognito, and basically Kier did the same thing in the ether factories, and that Helena carried the noble tradition. I don't think there's anything noble about it. But Mark says smells like horse crap. A worse word, but smells like horse crap. And I love that they kind of aren't putting up with him. He just says that flat out. But then Milchick's brutally honest and says Irving's never coming back. Ever. Like, he's gone, guys. And then he says, this went well. And then here you gotta be thinking, like, is this really Helly still? What if they're trying to do it again? But I think showing Helena first, like being told you have to be Helly, would deter the viewers from thinking about that. So that's good. I guess it's a good thing if it is Helly. It is a bad thing if they're tricking us again. I don't think they are. I think it's Helly. Pretty sure. 98% sure. Then we go to back to MDR. They all go back to MDR with a triple computer setup now instead of a quadruple. And Dylan says, I ain't going near that thing. And like, here's kind of where I got a little annoyed. Because I thought like the end of the last episode, there's no way they're gonna go back to work with all that. It's like the reveal that they've had a spy, that they're essentially killing Irving. They're gonna rebel. They better not do their jobs. And yeah, I was getting mad. I was like, guys, just rebel and don't do your job. But they all kind of sit down and do their job. So there's that. But I mean, they literally killed Irving, for God's sakes. And then we see the photos of all four of them with a removed Irving from the photo. And Milchick says, I would hate to resend services if you didn't comply. And he looks at Dylan with this. Obviously, he's talking about the family suite that Dylan's able to see, like his wife and maybe his kids. But Dylan says, hey, I want a funeral. And Mark says, hey, I want it to be quick. And it's a little weird. Mark's definitely the weird one in this episode. And here I wondered if he was outie Mark or he's just shook about Helly. It's kind of a bit of both if we get into it. But Mark starts to cough aggressively and goes into the bathroom. And my first thought was, is it the thing he ate in the beginning of the episode? Is there like something lodged in his throat or something? But we go to him standing in front of the mirror with like a really weird look. Like, he looks confused. Like, here I was like, is this outie Mark trying to think about how to be an innie? Is all this stuff going wrong with him? Just the look here at himself is a little confusing. But Helly comes in and it's reminiscent of a scene from season 1.
I'm gonna come in. I'm coming in. I'm fine, Mark.
I think I need to come in. I am going to come in, so get ready, do the things you need to do, because I'm coming in.
But then Helly says, I want to know how you couldn't tell it was Helena, which is like the obvious thing I knew she'd bring up. But he says, I don't know who you are, I guess. And he doesn't really want to tell her anything. He just kind of wants to move on. Then we go to a scene with Miss Huang and Milchick in a room where they're printing mugs of them. Of like Helly, Mark, and Dylan, but we do see later that they're all Irving. In the intro has a mug of only Irving, but he says their bereavement event that they are getting together, and Miss Huang says it's only for the innies who die on the floor, which I don't know, that's interesting. But she says, may I say a question? And what she says is he shouldn't have a funeral because it makes them feel like people. And obviously not a question. And he says that unsolicited.
Unsolicited.
And I love the way he says unsolicited there. But she also explains, hey, it's your first performance review today, right? With like a smile. Like, she's just a little... Anyways, okay. Then we go to Irving, I guess an animated version of Irving in a video with Irving mugs. And still, the random yellow light balloon thing in the corner. I don't care if we never learn what they're doing at Lumen. I don't care if they don't answer the big questions. I want to know what the hell this balloon is about, because this has been here since the beginning and I need to know. But anyways, there's Dylan, who does the eulogy. And then in the background, there's the Irving sign that they were printing in the previous scene that says that he worked from quarter 870 to 882. So that tells you how many quarters they've had. They've had a bunch. And he obviously worked a pretty big portion. And then Irving's fruit head with a black beauty watermelon from Malaysia as hair comes in. Here's the watermelon. It's black beauty watermelon from Malaysia. I don't know. It looks cool. And Miss Wong starts to play the theremin again. And Milchick basically tells her to follow him out. And she says, hey, I practiced for this. And he thinks the theremin is best in moderation. And basically tells her, you can play the piece for me later, yes? And he says it as a question, kind of, I guess, a rhetoric. Not a rhetoric, just a remark to the previous scene with them. Then we go to Mark, who eats by himself and then decides to leave the room. And before he does, Dylan drops the bombshell about his wife being here at Lumen as Miss Casey. And then Mark just dips. He just leaves. And Helly follows, and he's mad. He says he's mad that everything that he did with Helena, like walking through the halls, obviously the romance has now been outed, as like he's now been betrayed. All that trust. He walked down the halls with her, tried to find Miss Casey with her. And he doesn't want to place his trust in the wrong place again. Then we go to Natalie, who's talking with Milchick about the performance review. He mentions the paintings as a measure of appreciation, but wants to know how she felt when she got her paintings. This is like one of the few times we see her not smiling for once. And she clearly understood him, but she says she just wants to go to Mr. Drummond for the review. Then we go to Dylan, who looks at the watermelon Irv and sees the hang in there poster that I mentioned last week, that Irving mentioned last week. And he kind of looks behind it and sees the export hall drawing that Irving was making with directions on the back. And I for some reason thought this was like a Silo moment, Silo TV show moment, it felt like. But here is what it says. It says, from O&D, first turn right, all the way down the hall and turn right, then turn right, turn left, down a long hall, then turn left, turn right. She gave up and just started saying right, left, left, right. And now I give up because it's a bunch of that until the final line, which says turn right one more time and all the way down a long hall. So it ain't close, I guess, basically. And also, how does Felicia remember this to write all that down? Then we go to Mr. Drummond giving the review of Milchick with 2 to 6 hours because of atonement and approbations, apparently. And after the 4 hours mark, there's a nice little lunch break in there with orders in advance. And he's nice enough to even give the lunch menu to Milchick. But he says there's 3 contentions that were given anonymously, which they kind of spoil in the after credits who gave the tips. If you want to see that, I'll talk about that at the end. But 1 being that Mr. Milchick uses too many big words. 2 being that the paper clips installed were back to front. And 3 being that he brought in a new refining team for Mark with kindness reforms, like the Ortbo. And I actually felt bad for Milchick in this scene. I've wanted them to beat him up and like rise up, you know, kind of like beat the system kind of a thing. But I felt bad for him here. And knowing that Ortbo was just out of the kindness of his heart, that Milchick's actually been kind of nice to them, makes me feel a little bad for him. But I mean, to be fair, he did throw the marshmallows in the fire last episode. So then we go to Mark back working at his desk, and I think it's interesting him and Helly were in the hall, and now next time we see him he's just working by himself without Helly there. Like, okay, we don't really see any Helly the rest of the episode. Now here's the part where Mark goes through his files before he reaches Cold Harbor, but I think it's interesting the names of these. So first is Waynesboro, which is a city in Virginia, and second is Yakima, which is a city in Washington State. And then Allentown, which is a city in Pennsylvania. Those are the first 3 folders. Those go super fast, where you need to 100% go into editing software to slow those down. But here are the rest. Astoria, which is a place in Oregon. Then a town called Bellingham, which is in the state of Washington. Then Cairns, I believe it's pronounced, which is in Australia. Then Chicxulub, which is the crater of the asteroid that supposedly took out the dinosaurs. So that's interesting. Then the word cielo, which is not a place, but it's an Italian word that means sky or the heavens. So that's interesting. And then obviously he ends up at Cold Harbor. Now let me know what you guys think about all these places and then words. Like, I mean, these are obviously probably other files where other workers are working on these, maybe other branches or departments, but Cold Harbor is something different. Maybe they can create an asteroid to hit Earth, or I guess course correct an asteroid into Earth. But he's there doing Cold Harbor, and at the same time, Mr. Drummond says that this completion of Cold Harbor will be one of the greatest moments in the history of the planet. So, I mean, obviously it has to be something big. There's like the theories of revival, maybe reviving Kier, finding a way to revive human beings, like his wife, somehow. But then he says that the milestone of this event has clouded Milchick's judgment, and that he needs to start treating these people as they really are, which I guess means not people. And then we see this book that kind of summarizes this with the 3 things that were said, but one extra thing that mentioned the theft of card 7197-0, which is the same one that Dylan stole last season. Which, I mean, that's kind of interesting that he didn't mention that, and they get to show us for people that paused it. And it's kind of a cool callback. But then we see that Mark is now 85% complete of Cold Harbor before some headaches start to flash. His picture starts to go in and out. And then we go back to Milchick, who is looking through his report that showed the card, but they do some freezes or some areas where you can pause it and read. So I read everything there was, and basically there's the first contention, I think it was, and it says uses too many big words. Below is a word cloud of Seth Milchick's most frequently used words of the past quarter alone. It is recommended that Mr. Milchick begin simplifying his language so as to achieve clearer comprehension from his subordinates and peers. If only I could read that clearer. And then 2, it's the paper clips thing, but you can't really read more. They do it for like half a second, and there's just these words, so you can make of that what you will. And then 3, which is short-lived new refining team. The installation of a new refining team which failed to coalesce. Simple and to the point. And then there's like this really short, like half a second frame of like a back page that we don't even see, that says, despite his many and profound failing, and then like part of it cuts off as I guess the leader of the severed floor. I can't think of the name. There's some name for him being the leader, the manager of the floor. I don't know. It says, but in recent weeks, Mr. Milchick, something to prove the same level of energy and entitlement, maybe with a consistent basis. A man of such vigor as Milchick makes for an excellent ballast on which the employees can anchor their days. This sort of something is rare in the ranks of middle management. We wish to encourage the continuance of this behavior. So, I mean, that's a positive. Milchick's like, I guess they want more Milchick smiling. I don't know if I do. But then there's the thing that says calamitous ortbo, the arrangement of an outdoor retreatment and team occurrence to encourage, well, I guess they summarized it. They should have said the whole thing. But it says bonding and reduce fear of the outside world, or maybe feelings of wish for knowledge of the outside world. But it says which resulted in termination of one blank and the discovery of the true identity of another. At G, just the letter G, it cuts off, and harm to the Egan name. And as he's reading this, I mean, the looks are there. He's not happy about this. Then Milchick stops Mark as Mark is going through the elevator to going to work. And I thought it's interesting. Oh, wait. Are they going down the elevator together? They're supposed to stagger their exit. But he basically pauses the elevator with his card. And Mark mentions the fake newspaper, basically like, hey, are you going to, did Miss Huang take notes on that fake newspaper you showed me before? And then Milchick gets all close and personal. And he says, did you tell Helly that you effed her outie? And I was like, what the freak? That is insane. That kind of like, it was shocking because it's not really how Milchick talks, and he kind of just said that. And then he repeats that she's the leader in waiting. You did this to the leader in waiting, Mrs. Egan of this company. And Mark looked shocked here, and I was like, is it because Outie Mark is like learning that this happened and that this is like, you know, Egan family, or is it because he's shocked at Milchick being like this? This is like the first time we've seen Milchick like kind of petty and rude. And I mean, it kind of shows Milchick not trying. He's not trying that hard here to be like a good official, because I mean, he's tried his best and he's still getting, you know, judged for the paper clips he's putting and the big words he's using, and for, I guess, just trying to help them. But he's getting judged, and basically he's petty here. He's petty, which we don't see Milchick being. Then we go to Devin, who's reading Rickon's new book edition, and it says no workers had a job or a watch, and gets to enjoy the giant clocks ticking of Lumen. And he's trying to speak the Innies language, trying to do a Trojan horse-like idea to get some info in there to help maybe the Innies rebel. But I mean, this is still kind of like a debate if he should do it or not with his wife. But then we go to Irving, who's not on a cruise, but instead touching his paintings with his hands. He stacks them, then goes to the phone booth again and says, it's me again. This is like season 2, episode 1. No, 2. I think season 2, episode 2. Yeah, it was 2. He said, it's me. He always goes to this phone booth. He's talking to someone, maybe Ragabi. But he says, so they fired me. They must have known what my Innie was up to. And then we see Bert watching from a car again, which the same last time he was in the phone booth, he was watching him. And maybe what Irving means is that he's trying to get his Innie to find that hallway. I think there's even more proof of that later in the after credit stuff, that Irving's trying to get his Innie to find that hallway. But Bert kind of pulls up and asks why Irv was at his house those days ago, which is when it was his Innie. And he somehow can tell that it wasn't him. It wasn't this Irv, Outie Irv. But Bert says that he got canned a couple weeks back, which is interesting because we were told that he was retired, that he just decided to retire. But he was told it was because of an erotic entanglement, and they sure like that word. But they kind of come to the conclusion that he thinks that they were an item in the Innie world. And Bert says here that his husband's named Fields, and because of Irving showing up, they had to cancel a trip to Milwaukee. I'm not exactly sure why they would have to cancel, unless, you know, Bert was like, Irv's way more attractive than you. But Bert wants Irv to come over for dinner, and for some reason, I weirdly don't trust him. I get this weirder vibe, like he's not the nice Bert that he is Innie, that he's kind of putting on an act. I don't know. I feel like maybe he works for Lumen. He's trying to like capture Irv. I don't know. I don't trust him, and I'm gonna stick to that. And then, like I said, I think last week, no, episode 4. Wait, that was last week. Episode 3. Severance likes weird close-ups to start a scene. They don't want to give you any context to where we are. They start with some hands in a box in this scene. And we see the knitting of Gemma, some weird necklace. And Mark comes down into the basement with Ragabi being the one with the hands in the box. And Mark says, what the F are you doing? And Ragabi's going through Gemma's things, with one of those things being ashes in that box that we're told to be Gemma's ashes. And Mark asks who's in there, whose ashes are in there. And Ragabi says that Lumen knows people at the morgue on payroll like everywhere else in Kier. And this line was, if I'm getting it right, it was incredibly revealing. She said, like, okay, I don't remember the exact words. I wrote it down, but she says, Lumen knows people at the morgue on payroll like everywhere else in Kier. That's what she said. In Kier, everywhere else? And I'm like, wait, what do you mean everywhere else in Kier? Kier was this guy. And so that makes me think, do they live in a state or town called Kier? Because I think that's what that was. That was kind of revealing. Everywhere else in Kier? Really? Or you can point me out to something maybe I'm missing with this line. I mean, to me, this tells me they live in a place called Kier, which kind of makes sense because, I mean, the apartments we've seen, the living areas, the restaurants are all named after Egan's. So it would make sense if the entire, like, city was called Kier. But Mark starts to cough again, and they kind of gloss over it. But Ragabi says that we should wait another day to do more reintegration. And then there's this clear ADR voiceover, which is not something I'd see Severance doing. Severance is normally very, like, official or professional, but it's clearly, you can tell from the voice that it's clearly recorded ADR, and that her voice isn't moving. She's not talking.
I don't want to rush things. There's risk. It's not an exact science, Mark.
But after this, Mark asks her if they're hurting his wife, Gemma, and she says she doesn't know. And then Mark starts to hear Miss Casey talking during their wellness session, one of their wellness sessions, one that was off screen because it's not the same one that we saw last season. But as he's walking, he kind of walks through Lumen Hall as well as his house hallway, kind of like how Petey did when he thought he was walking through a hall, but he was really on a bridge. But he sees Miss Casey at the end of this hallway, or when he turns around, and sees Miss Casey talking to him in the hall, and he kind of starts to tear up, and then it goes black, and it goes black for like 10 seconds. They toyed with my hope. I was like, please, okay, the episode's not over. Please, the episode's not over. Please, 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 please. Like that, I waited that long, and then it was over. It went to credits. Like after 10 seconds of blackness. That was crazy. But then, as we always do, there's the after credit stuff. I will talk about the things of note from the after credit stuff. For one, we're already halfway over, which, damn, after waiting that long, we're halfway over. That's crazy. But anyways, one thing of note here is that Dylan is mad at himself. They talk about the fact that Dylan is mad at himself, that he got distracted with his wife and didn't look toward Irv or help Irv, and he's got to battle through this guilt. And then they talk about Miss Huang for a little bit, and they say she's not intimidated by Milchick, that she's strong-willed, and that they wanted some interesting dynamic of her being a superior and being younger than them at the same time. And then Milchick wondering if Huang was trying to take his role. That's what they're saying, that Milchick is wondering if Huang's trying to take his role, and that Milchick is questioning the company as a whole. And then they reveal that Miss Huang was the one who reported him with the anonymous tips about him using the big words or whatever. So there's some beef there. And then they talk about the performance review, and he says that this performance review could be the end of Milchick. That's what he says, and they don't talk about it anymore. I'm like, what do you mean the end of Milchick? And I think this means as we know him. Like the end of Milchick as we know him. This smiley guy, this company man. Maybe he gets a little more angry. Maybe he doesn't trust the company as much. Maybe this is just alluding to the fact this is the end of Milchick as we've come to know him, and that's interesting. What I would love to see is if Milchick, like, kind of banded with our group against the rest of Lumen. I don't think that would happen, but that would just be so exciting. Then they talk about Mark not only second guessing Helly as a person, if it's Helly or Helena, but second guessing who he's actually in love with, which is interesting. And they also talk about the end here, that they still don't know why, or they do, but we still don't know why Irving came to Lumen and why he wants his innie to go back to that black hallway. And so that's a good reveal. In the after credits thing, again, they do reveal a lot. But we know now that this is what he meant about his innie doing something that must have gotten him fired, that he wants his innie to find this hallway. So maybe there's someone else he loves in Cold Arbor, like the same situation with like Mark's wife. Maybe something like that. We'll just have to see. But I mean, this is the most notes I like had for an episode in months, like including Silo and Severance. So I tried to go through it as fast as possible, but it's still probably a long video. So thank you guys so much for watching, especially through the full thing, for those of you who did, or those that you skipped around. Thank you. But I hope you guys have a good rest of your day, and I'll be back next week for Severance again. Goodbye.